The footage you're looking at is a segment of what is referred to as the 1993 Anchorage hostage situation, and not only is it incredibly unnerving, but I can guarantee you that this is the first time it has ever been discussed on YouTube. Being a 90s home video, it's naturally pretty blurry, but in this footage, a man who is convinced that his entire family are aliens is holding his much younger brother hostage while police attempt to get him to stop. There's a lot more that goes into this, so I'll tell you everything, but as usual, let's get into the backstories first. If you asked anyone who knew 20-year-old Terrence Cloyd, they'd tell you he was outgoing, kind, thoughtful, and just a talented athlete with a soft side. He was known to be very generous. He had a solid wrestling career behind him, winning 2 state titles and 3 regional championships, but again, as tough as he was, off the mats he was known for being sensitive, well-liked, and deeply devoted to his family. That's what makes what we're about to get into so difficult for people to understand, but before I do that, let me give you a bit more background information first, as it turns out, Terrence struggled a lot more than his peers in Alaska actually realized, and what they were saying might not have all been true. Growing up with albinism, Terrence Cloyd always stood out, something he admitted made life harder. And this wasn't all that he dealt with. He took a gunshot to the leg as a teen, bounced between different homes and coaches throughout high school, but still managed to push forward. He was a talented wrestler with raw potential, earning a scholarship and disability aid to attend Highline Community College in Washington. But for all the potential and kindness people saw, there were also moments where something darker peeked through. One classmate remembered him being great with friends, but coming on too strong with girls. He'd expect attention, but then turn cold if he didn't get it. Another recalled being kicked out of a teen club with him because Terrence caused a disturbance, and there were stretches of time where people noticed strange behavior. There's stories of him mumbling to himself, claiming people were aliens, or saying things that didn't make any sense at all. The pressure he carried wasn't all internal. His mother, Patricia Cloyd, had a long history with the law. She had arrests under multiple names for things like shoplifting and prostitution. She did time and then disappeared from state records altogether. One landlord later claimed she lied about her employment and told him she had money tied up with the IRS. But still, by most accounts, the home that Terrence lived in was kept clean and the kids were polite. He also tried to outrun some of this instability through wrestling. It was an outlet for him. He'd write poetry about his mother and read it aloud to his teammates. But after returning to Anchorage, his behavior turned more erratic. He began calling police with bizarre claims, again saying people were aliens, and seemed increasingly paranoid. In one incident, he was cited for failing to obey a police officer and taken to jail. Days later, his mother had him admitted to a psychiatric facility, but he was released almost immediately. And just one day before the horrible events we're about to get into, he showed up at his little brother's school, Scenic Park Elementary, and tried to take him out of class. When the principal refused, Terrence came back with his mother, and this time they signed the boy out. What nobody knew was that this would be the final calm before everything collapsed. Things were about to get extremely dark for this family. On May 19th, 1993, for one reason or another, something absolutely snapped inside the mind of Terrence Cloyd. He returned back to his home armed, where his mother, 8-year-old sister, and 10-year-old brother were sleeping. He woke them up, brought them into the washroom at gunpoint, and took out both his sister and his own mother in front of the little brother. Forensic analysis later determined that his mother put up a fight, but unfortunately it was futile. Neither of them would survive. He then placed his mother and his 8-year-old sister in the bathtub before grabbing a hold of his 10-year-old brother and leaving the home. Eventually, a motorist called in, and Anchorage police received a report about a man walking down the center of Muldoon Road, barefoot, partially undressed, holding a young boy tightly in front of him with a gun in his right hand. It was around this point that a nearby woman, a 20-year-old nursing student, began to record Terrence on a road outside of her home. They didn't appear injured, but the man was clearly in crisis. And of course, that man was 20-year-old Terrence Cloyd, and the boy he was holding was his 10-year-old brother, Xanders. Witnesses said Terrence seemed unhinged, pacing the road with purpose but speaking strangely. He removed his socks, tossed aside his pants, and wrapped his coat around his younger brother to keep him warm. At one point, he took off his shoes and told the boy to stand in them. According to police negotiators, Terrence kept referring to his brother as some kind of alien and said he'd already killed his mother and sister because they weren't from this world. He also spoke of Martians. It was like he believed his family had been replaced by something that was not human. And then Terrence gave them an address, and when officers went to the home, they indeed found his mother and his younger sister in the bathtub, just as he had claimed. Back at the scene on Muldoon Road, he continued to act erratically, saying delusional things, but the situation eventually reached a breaking point when Terrence reportedly told the officers that he was going to send his little brother to meet his mother and sister. That's when police snipers, who had been stationed nearby, made the decision to act. They took one shot that knocked him to the ground, and shortly after, there was another one directly to his head. All of this was caught by the 20-year-old woman, and obviously I won't be showing you it, but here's an audio snippet.
They got him. They just shot him. Oh, they just blew his off. Oh my God.
Terrence Cloyd was taken out instantly. His younger brother, though visibly traumatized, was thankfully unharmed and taken to the hospital for evaluation. He was released the same day, but this psychological trauma was not something that was going to leave him quickly, which I'll touch back on shortly. The community was stunned, not just because of the tragedy itself, but because of who Terrence had been and how impossible it seemed to square that image with what had just happened. No one could explain what caused him to snap, but obviously many people speculated about possible delusions or illnesses. There were mentions of something similar to Capgras syndrome, where a person believes their loved ones have been replaced by imposters, but no diagnosis was ever confirmed. In the days that followed, an Alaskan bank set up a trust fund for his surviving brother to help cover educational expenses and provide some support as he began to recover from the trauma. It's absolutely no excuse, but clearly something did break in this guy, and tragically 2 homicides were committed before anyone could properly intervene, and his surviving brother is the only one who lived to remember it all. I tried doing some research to see if there were any updates on his younger brother, who would now of course be a grown man, and I came across some pretty unfortunate articles. When you look up his name, Xanders Herndon, along with Anchorage and some other key terms, articles pertaining to massive drug seizures and felony firearm possession come up. Now, I can't directly confirm if this is the younger brother, so take this with a grain of salt, but the ages line up directly. He was 10 at the time of the incident in 1993 and would have been 31 in 2014 when these articles emerged. He also has an incredibly uncommon name, and these crimes did take place in Alaska. Again, I cannot confirm for sure if this is him, but if so, it's really just crappy, and it seems as though he had turned to a life of crime well after these horrible events. The 1993 Anchorage hostage situation is largely forgotten to time. In fact, again, I don't think anyone else has ever covered this on YouTube. But sadly, a lot of these topics are still very relevant, and I don't think that the story deserves to be forgotten. Rest in peace to Terrence's mom as well as his younger sister. Also, I just want to give a special thank you to my friend Ty, who runs the Vintage Videos 2.0 and Extreme Reality TV YouTube channels. He was the one who initially pointed me towards this case, linked most of the information, and even spent a good amount of time digging up all the old newspaper articles, so thank you. This entry is genuinely just one of the most perplexing accidents that I've ever come across, and as I tell it, I think you're going to be pretty surprised about how it ends. It begins with a man from Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania named Thomas Poynton Jr. Tom was a devoted husband, a father, and an educator whose life mostly centered around family, football, and his community. Born in 1984 and raised in the Easton area, he graduated from Wilson Area High School in 2003 and went on to earn a bachelor's degree, eventually completing his master's in education. He spent his career teaching business and coaching football at Palisades School District, where it seems that he was mostly known for his loyalty and passion, both on the field and in the classroom. Outside of work, he co-owned a small business with a lifelong friend. I always love to see a business teacher who actually has a business. And most of all, he just cherished quiet moments with his wife and his 20-month-old daughter, who he absolutely adored. He found joy in the simple things, his 2 dogs, his home, and his faith. By all accounts, Thomas put the people that he loved above everything and just seemed like an absolutely awesome guy. But unfortunately, as we've learned on this channel, so many great people like this experience completely unexpected or tragic situations, and poor Thomas was no exception. On the morning of July 26, 2016, Tom and his wife were inside their Williams Township home and just going about their day completely as usual. This was summertime, and so Tom was off work, and it was just before 9 a.m., so they'd be tending to their young girl as usual, eating breakfast and planning the day ahead. But all this completely changed when they heard a loud noise outside out of nowhere. They later described this as sounding like some sort of explosion. It came from the direction of their yard, and they actually had just let one of their 2 dogs outside, so Tom probably assumed that this had something to do with his dog. He was the kind of guy who didn't hesitate when something seemed off, and he wasn't going to wait for anyone else to act, so he immediately ran towards the dog to see what was going on, and quickly he was horrified at what he saw. When the couple went outside to investigate, their one dog was on the lawn and visibly in a ton of distress. He was essentially convulsing on the ground. Tom, being absolutely horrified and still barefoot, quickly moved towards the dog to see what was happening and to attempt to render some aid. His wife followed as well, but before Tom could even get to his dog, something really bad happened. Tom also fell to the ground and started to exhibit similar signs of distress as his dog, convulsing and clearly in a lot of pain. His wife, who I can only imagine was absolutely terrified, quickly ran back inside to call the police. Some of you may already have an idea, but what the hell happened here and what caused both Tom and his beloved dog to drop to the ground like this? Well, it turns out that what happened, and what neither of them knew, was that a 34,500 volt power line had fallen into their yard, essentially rendering their own backyard into a death trap. The ground was live and energized with a massive amount of electricity. The company responsible for this fatal error is called Met-Ed. The wire had made contact with the ground, and because the ground fault protection system failed, high voltage current was traveling through the soil and was not immediately stopped. When Thomas stepped outside barefoot after going after his dog, he was electrocuted. His wife thankfully was not injured. Firefighters responded, but the scene was of course too dangerous to approach until Met-Ed was able to shut off power to the downed line. By the time it was ruled safe, about 36 minutes later, the backyard and part of the house had also caught fire. In the aftermath, both Thomas and one of their family dogs had unfortunately passed away, as the situation was obviously just too much. In the weeks that followed, a formal investigation was launched by the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission. They found that Met-Ed had installed bronze hotline clamps on aluminum conductors, materials that are not recommended to be used together according to manufacturer specification. So over time, this caused the conductor to deteriorate, and on the morning of July 26, 2016, the compromised connection failed, leading to the power line falling into the Poynton's yard. Again, the PUC also determined that Met-Ed's ground fault protection system failed to operate properly, and the line stayed live even after it hit the ground. In September of 2016, the Poynton family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Met-Ed, alleging negligence related to the installation and maintenance of the power lines. And in April of 2021, the PUC finally approved a settlement agreement. Met-Ed committed more than $16 million towards safety improvements across its system. A separate civil lawsuit brought by the Poynton family was settled privately, and the terms were not made public. So I can only hope they got a ton of money. Thomas Poynton Jr. was 31 years old, had a 20-month-old daughter, and a family and community who absolutely adored him. It's always just so sad to see things like this happen, especially to someone so young. Rest in peace to this great man. Don't worry guys, this isn't a sponsor, but before we get into this next case, I just wanted to remind you that these sources and newspaper clippings I use for my research will be included in the description below. And if you would like to support the channel, I included links to my Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee, but don't at all feel obligated to if it isn't within your means. I also have a Discord server with well over 200 people. Everyone's super cool, we do digital gift card giveaways and stuff, and we'd all love to see you in there. This entry is going to be pretty short just because of the nature of it, but it is right here on YouTube after all, so if you're an adult, you can make your own decisions. However, I would highly advise you to just stay right here with me. Nothing about your day will get better by going to watch this video. It will almost certainly stick with you, and not in a good way. It is an official crime scene video, but I think it may be a contender for the most disturbing video on the platform, unless there's one that you think is worse and I just haven't seen or heard of. For me, because of details that we'll get into shortly, I personally would have to deem it the worst thing that I've ever seen that's still currently on YouTube. And if you still don't believe me that you should not seek this out, well, here's a few comments. The video in question is related to the 1984 San Ysidro McDonald's massacre, which I'm not really going to go that deep into because it is a very well-known horrifying event. And it's been covered countless times before. I'm going to sum it up for you just in case you are not aware of it, but if you'd like to know the entire story and all of the insane details surrounding it, I highly recommend this video by Forgotten History. The 1984 San Ysidro Massacre was a mass shooting event that unfolded on July 18th in a busy McDonald's restaurant in the San Ysidro neighborhood of San Diego, California. That afternoon, 41-year-old James Huberty walked into the McDonald's restaurant and opened fire on unsuspecting customers and employees, all of whom were unarmed civilians. Over the course of 77 terrifying minutes, Huberty took 21 people out and injured 19 more, ranging from young children all the way to elderly patrons. Surviving witnesses described the scene as total chaos, with people hiding under tables and even playing dead in desperate attempts to survive. Law enforcement arrived pretty quickly but initially held back, uncertain of how many shooters were inside. This was not a common thing back then, and so they were not at all well prepared. Eventually, a police sniper was able to take out Huberty through a window. In the aftermath, the event devastated the San Ysidro community and, at the time, was the largest public mass shooting in U.S. history. Again, there is a lot more to this, but that's a summary of the events of that fateful day. And I cannot even begin to imagine what these people experienced. 77 minutes of not knowing who he's going to get next. He allegedly played a radio and danced at certain points. The personal accounts are terrifying. This event brings us to what I deem to be the worst thing currently available on YouTube. It is the official crime scene documentation footage of the aftermath of this event. It begins outside, enters the McDonald's, and slowly spans the entire scene, including all 21 deceased victims as well as the shooter himself, laying there while the sounds of the McDonald's kitchen eerily beeps away. The lighting is oddly dark, but you see absolutely everything, and from the very start of the video, you already know it's going to be horrible. This footage was just particularly devastating to me, as well as most of the people who have watched it, just because of the ages of those involved. And to be completely honest, I don't know how this is still available to watch on here. I saw comments on there who were relatives of some of the victims inside and outside of the McDonald's, and they were saying that this should not be available to watch. And I think their words hold more weight than anything you or I could say. So this is one I just wanted to touch on pretty briefly because I find the whole thing pretty interesting. It involves the very famous Madeleine McCann case, which I know most of you have almost certainly heard. However, I've seen a photo going around the internet recently claiming to be her final photo, and the thing is I just don't ever recall seeing it until recently. I always remember this being her final photo, and even now when you go onto Google and look up Madeleine McCann final photo, this is all that you see. But I got to the bottom of it. After a bit of digging, I guess it first surfaced in a Netflix doc in March of 2019. I most likely just missed it when I first watched, but either way, there's something about this photo to me that is just so eerie. For those of you who may not know the Madeleine McCann case, this is a very complex one, but to sum it up, in May of 2007, 3-year-old Madeleine McCann vanished from her family's holiday apartment in Portugal. She slept in the same unit as her toddler twins while her parents, Kate and Jerry, left them alone and went out to get some food nearby, checking on the children intermittently. But around 10 p.m., Kate discovered Madeleine was missing from the unit. Portuguese authorities launched a full-scale missing persons investigation. Early theories ranged pretty widely. There was possible abduction, a burglary gone awry, traffickers, or maybe that Madeleine had just wandered off alone. A lot of people also questioned the parents as they left them alone quite often, and if something major happened, why did the twins not wake up? So by September 2007, Kate and Jerry McCann were formally classified as suspects. Cadaver dogs reportedly alerted to the smell of a corpse in both the apartment and the family's rented vehicle, but the couple denied any involvement. By July of 2008, both were officially cleared due to a lack of evidence, and the case was archived by the Portuguese prosecutor's office. And then in 2011, another operation was launched out of the UK. At this point, the public began to come up with a lot of theories. There was the one about a lone predator with local connections to that area, organized trafficking rings, potentially targeting wealthy families or ring operations, and as mentioned before, a lot of people thought it may have been an accident, like Madeleine just wandered off into the night and suffered some sort of unforeseen fate. But a lot of suspicions still surrounded the parents, Kate and Jerry. Some people believe that they accidentally harmed Madeleine and then covered it up. They were doctors after all. And of course, cadaver dog alerts and alleged traces of blood fueled those claims, so there was no forensic evidence to support any of these theories. But the public really just thinks that they have something to do with it, and if you go in depth on this, you'll understand why. They refused to answer any questions. There was apparently 40 plus questions that they denied, and the fact that they were seen partying some days after the event didn't help their case. And also, again, that they always left them alone. But then a major development came. In 2020, German prosecutors identified Christian Bruckner, a convicted sex offender living nearby in 2007, as a prime suspect in a separate active homicide investigation. Multiple searches have intensified, and what they found on this man was absolutely and utterly disgusting. Still, they are working to get him for the Maddie McCann case. And actually extremely recently, like within the past 2 weeks, German and Portuguese teams have examined roadwork trenches in Bruckner's former campsite using ground-penetrating radar to locate a potential burial site. They retrieved bone fragments, items of clothing, and 2 firearms from the area. Those items are now undergoing forensic analysis. Again, this is very recent, but hopefully we'll get some updates soon, because officials described ongoing searches as very constructive and framed them as a major breakthrough. But they made sure to emphasize that the discoveries must be tested against missing person databases before they can support any charges. But they are alluding to the fact that it may be Madeline. So yeah, knowing all of this and now seeing this photograph, it just feels really uncanny to me. I don't know if anyone else gets what I'm talking about, but I found it gave me an unusual feeling, so I figured I'd touch on it. If you look at other photos that were taken beforehand, they're also a little weird, but like, her dad's in them and stuff at least. There's something about this one that just spooked me. Thank you guys so much for watching, I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, I have a metric ton more of these, just so many stories that people haven't heard of. And sometimes it sucks because I know a lot of the older videos aren't going to get seen by my newer audience, so just consider checking them out, and if not, it's okay.